All right. All right, I'm back because, I have not finished this Jaeger, so it's still drunk history time. Drunk high story time. So, what do y'all want to know? The gods are planets, the gods are constellations, the gods are land masses, the gods are, I'm talking about the ancient gods, the ones that like Yahweh was cobbled together from, when Yahweh like sent the flood, he was Enlil, when he warned mankind, he was Enki when he raised the rainbow to warn men to pledge, that it wouldn't happen again. He was Ishtar Inanna, the goddess. Um, but Ishtar Inanna is Venus, and she's the morning star. The Venus, such a bright planet, rises in the morning. Um, and if there was a rainbow in the morning after a flood, it might seem that Ishtar was raising the rainbow, just as it could be said that the sunrise was raising the rainbow. Um, I don't know. I don't know all the specifics of it, but I do know that Ishtar was always going to the underworld. Um, some say that Ishtar was also, or I think in Hamlet's Mill, they say that Ishtar Nana was also a constellation. So I would have to look into that to really speak with any authority about Ishtar. But she was something up there, and everything up there basically goes to the underworld. It goes west, just like any sailor would, goes to America. And then it usually comes back again from the underworld. That's why they say only the gods go to the underworld and live and return to tell the tale. I think they were partly trying to discourage people from going over there, just because a lot of the royals had like special knowledge of America, and so they probably had key trading, you know, connections, key like conduits. The oldest map of America is about 5,000 years old. It's Egyptian. It's a map of the underworld, in a typical Egyptian style. It's in a tomb. It's in Tomb 100 at Hierakonpolis. At it was later called Meccan, or it was, I think Hierakonpolis was the Greek name for it, but it was, I think, the Egyptian name for it. So it was Meccan, meaning basically the city of the hawk. So in a way, it was the first city of Horus. Um, and this and there's a lot of other maps of America from Egypt, from ancient Egypt, like um, 4,000-year-old, 3,000-year-old maps, and they're all designated as the underworld, or they refer to it as Amentet Neferet, which means the beautiful West, and they also call it they call it Duat, they call it Aker, uh, and there's probably other names for the underworld. Same as in the Sumerian tradition, there were a lot of names for the underworld. Kur was, I think, the most prominent name Sumerians used. But a lot of the symbolism and traditions about the underworld are almost identical for Sumerian and Egyptian traditions, as are a lot of the funerary traditions, like the opening of the mouth tools that they used on the mummies in Egypt were called by the same name, the opening of the mouth tools in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Yeah, I believe it's in the Epic of Gilgamesh or some other traditions about surrounding Gilgamesh. Um, so yeah, we have like an ancient world where they knew a lot of what we know, much more than what the average one of us knows, much more than what I know, but the ancient priests, the ancient, priests, kings, and scholars, and I mean, the thing is, religion was science, you know, and it was. I'm not sure if science existed outside of religion. I certainly haven't seen any non-religious science prior to maybe some of the Greek stuff. Um, and there's some who trace it to the Greeks, this connection or this disconnect between uh, the ancient world and us and our inability to uh, translate or understand what the hell the ancients were saying. Um, there's people who say that Plato, for instance, was the breaking point. Others say Newton was the breaking point. Others put it much more recent. I mean, I think both Plato and Newton understood a lot more about what the ancient religion and the ancient traditions were about than, well, by far than the average modern person, but more than pretty much anybody would on some points, nowadays. And partly that's just natural result of proximity. Um, in time, you know. But I mean, basically, that at some point people decided that no, like mythology, and I don't know if this was Plato who started this ball rolling, saying basically mythology means it's not real, it's fanciful, um, as opposed to what the thesis of the book that only recently came into contact with. I've not read it, but I've listened to it online and gleaned a lot of it. Hamlet's Mill. It basically says that it's all, it's all science. It's all of the ancient religions. A lot of it is about the precession of the equinox and the interaction of planets with, and probably the moon as well, with um, the other asterisms, the constellations. Uh, so, I mean, to me, like a mandala, like I've been looking at a lot of mandalas of the the Navajos and the Aztecs and the Maya and the Tibetans, both the Buddhists and the Bon uh, people, and these you know mandalas are largely cosmological. They're largely showing um, this kind of pyramidal, same cosmological concept as the Babylonian, but in a round, or actually a lot of them are square as well. So it is, a lot of times it is exactly like the ziggurat pyramid, step pyramid concept in a 3D form, which is the true form of it. Um, but a lot of times it's round as well, and it's basically ways to divide up and measure both time and space in relation to each other, uh, and to show, like, at certain times which celestial bodies were aligned with which terrestrial bodies, which terrestrial points, basically. You can divide the earth however you want. There can be 7 underworlds, there can be 9 underworlds. In different traditions, there are different numbers. The reason there are so many different numbers and yet the rest of the tradition remains so similar is because on some level it doesn't matter the number, um, because it's arbitrary. You're dividing the earth and you're measuring the earth. So you can measure it. You could say, well, I'm going to divide it into 14 and have 7 on each side and then have 7 heavens. I mean, that was one that a lot of traditions use, partly because of that, because you could align it with the 7 celestial bodies. The was it uh, moon, sun, and then the 5 visible planets. And that, I don't know if it might have just served the purpose of being easily memorable, because then you could use that to divide. You could use that system of 7 to divide the overworld and the underworld and the heavens. And so that, I mean, I think it was 7 in the Babylonian tradition, 7 in the Zoroastrian, the ancient Persian tradition. There were 7 worlds, 7 underworlds, and I believe it was 7 in the Hindu tradition, 7 patalas. Although maybe there was 8 heavens, but there were 7 worlds and 7 underworlds. I mean, honestly, just even if people were able to understand that there's more to all this shit than we're told, like if your teacher just says, oh, well, these are some myths, about fertility, and they just had this psychological compulsion to do these rituals. But if you think that maybe there's something more to that shit, and maybe they might have been scientists, maybe they might have been, like, if people can just keep looking more into it, then it might come to light, but sadly, a lot of that goes unquestioned. The idea that, well, before Christianity, before monotheism, people, at least the pagans, like before the great philosophers, at least, like the Stoics and the whoever it was that were the enlightened philosophers of Europe, that all the mythology is just basically crazy. Like it's all dumb, crazy, primitive, compulsive. I mean, this is stuff that I pretty much believed. I didn't not understand this at all a few years ago. Until I really looked into it. I basically believed that a lot of this mythology is just nonsense, and that a lot of paganism was just total insanity. But the more I've looked into it, I've seen that, it's not like I worship paganism in the sense of that I think everything they did was right and that we should replicate everything they did. But it cannot be denied they were very advanced scientists, and that was part and parcel of paganism, and that was their legacy to us. Like, all of our sciences are based on pagan science. That's just a fact. Like, all of our, even the, I guess some people put Plato as like being a non-mythological, like a true scientist, like a first true scientist, or maybe Newton as a first true scientist, or somebody. But I guarantee all of these first true scientists leaned heavily and basically were standing on the shoulders of of soldiers, of pagans, basically, of pagan science, and the knowledge that had been built up since Göbekli Tepe, since before Göbekli Tepe. Like they say, even the Upper Paleolithic sites of like Lusco and all these cave paintings are basically they're all basically astronomy. They were studying the stars. They already had quite likely established some of the constellations that we actually know today, or at least constellations related to the ones that we know today during Paleolithic times, like 20,000, 30,000 years ago. And Göbekli Tepe itself is probably, I think, at least 20,000 years old, because the most advanced parts of it, 12,000-year-old ones, it only gets more advanced the further back it goes. Like there's the 10,000-year-old, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. But then you get to the 11,000-year-old, the 12,000-year-old, and then it's just like, holy shit. It's far beyond what, like, it, in that sense, at least aesthetically, at least like you can definitely tell from the 12,000-year-old enclosures there that they were very, very advanced you know people as far as masonry is concerned, and all the precision and the yeah, they were masters. And when you look at the 10,000-year-old one, you see that yes, they were masters. They were probably masters compared to the vast majority of people, but they were not master. They were not to the level, or even really close to the level of the 12,000-year-old ones. They might have been closer to the level than everybody else, but they're still very far from the level of the 12,000-year-old ones. And with 50,000, with 50 remaining to be excavated still in the ground at Göbekli Tepe, if, like, I tried to do a rough estimation, and I said about 250 years, every 250 years, a new enclosure was built at Göbekli Tepe. Somebody should double check this. This could be totally wrong, but it seems like it was about that, because every time a enclosure was built, the previous one was covered, and based on the amount of time, from 12,000 to 10,000, I estimated it was about every 250 years. So let's say that. I mean, you can estimate it one way or another, but it's somewhere in the general ballpark, I would guess. So if there's 50,000, if there's 50 more enclosures buried at Göbekli Tepe, which is in northern Mesopotamia, in present day Turkey, also claimed by Kurdistan, also claimed by some Armenians, also claimed by America, probably, claimed by everybody, but it's in technically Turkey, Kurdistan kind of place. And these 50 enclosures would imply about 20, that basically that the first enclosure, if they had all been built, because all the still buried enclosures are probably older than everything yet uncovered. That's the way it works. Like, they built on top of the previous enclosures, basically. they built an entire mountain of like massive mountain, like mini football fields, I think, of a mountain, just on these enclosures, building one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. And so if we, like, I basically tried to do the math. What I came to was that it was about 24,000 years ago, basically 12,500 or something, 12,000 years before the 12,000-year-old enclosure. So that's what's yet to be excavated at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, just over the border from Syria. And the the sensors and the experts said there may be as many as 50 enclosures, and they may be as impressive, as monolithic, as megalithic as the 12,000-year-old one, the by far the most impressive one, the most impressive anything on Earth from its point in time that we've found, from its point in time until, like, 6,000 years later or whenever, like Sumer. This is major megalithic achievement. We're talking about pillars that are symmetrical, that are 22 feet tall, that are 20 tons. It's definitely either 22 feet tall and 20 tons, or 20 tons and 22 feet tall, or 20. All right. It's one or the other, 22 and 20. Imagine that. This is 12,000 years ago. What were you doing 12,000 years ago? Jack shit. Jack shit, right? I'm just saying, like, I have respect for Göbekli Tepe because 12,000 years before I was basically doing jack shit, they built a temple, 12 pillars around, possibly zodiacal, 2 pillars in the middle, very similar to Brunekel, the Neanderthal temple from 175,000 years old in France, and a lot of iconography and symbolism on all of these pillars, suggestive of, well, quite easily, some of it very suggestive of astronomical phenomena. So that would make a lot of sense if it was zodiacal. So they're saying all these 50 ones that are still buried are just as robust, just as megalithic as the 12,000-year-old ones, the most advanced things seen for 6,000 years or whatever, until 3,000 BC or later, or more advanced, possibly more. So we're talking about 50 enclosures. Did I even say enclosures before? Okay, these are 50 enclosures built, still unexcavated, and they don't even want to excavate them. They say, like, we can't excavate them because we don't have the science to preserve them, which, like, I totally sympathize with, but it's like, is that like, are you serious? Like we still have to excavate it. I don't know. I'm very conflicted, at least on that. I lean towards excavating it somehow, at least getting some better sense of it. So these people, like, if they're doing this every 250 years, and there's 50 of them, so this sets it back like 24,000 years ago of technology, of Masonic technology, stonemasonry, on a level that was not seen until I don't know, Sumer until like, well, maybe until like Malta at like 7,000, 8,000 years ago. Um, and very similar to a lot of other megalithic structures that were later, but in some respects more impressive than a lot of it. I don't know. I find it more impressive than like Stonehenge or most of the megalithic sites. And maybe that's partly because it was so completely buried, so it retained a lot of its luster, it retained a lot of its pristine beauty. But you know, so if we're saying 24,000 years ago ish, or let's be pussies about it. Let's say it's only like 20,000 years ago, or like I don't know. I mean, it's got to be at least like 20,000 years ago. Let's say it's only 18,000 years ago. Okay, it's only 18,000 years ago. It's still like basically right after the peak of the last ice age. It's not. It's only like might be like only a little over a decade after the last Neanderthals, depending on, there's some of the estimates that some of the Neanderthals may have lasted to like 30,000 years ago. Um, and I mean, I think that a lot of this technology goes back. It goes back, uh, you know, probably a lot of this goes back like 100,000, 200,000 years ago to like the earliest, these to the Neanderthals, to the early sapiens, and like southern Africa, to the like all of this. I think all these people were so much more advanced than we give them credit for, and to some extent, they were more advanced than we are, because not only did they probably know how to live by their wits, and like probably like you could throw them out in the jungle and they'd survive and whatever, but they understood the stars. They understood, a lot more than a lot of us. A lot of us only understand how to like, whatever we're paid to do, and that's all we really need to know. And maybe a few other things to kind of like pass as cognizant, but like anyway, so this is an entreaty to listen to the ancients, to take them sometimes at their word and sometimes not, sometimes understanding that they're speaking symbolically, when when they're talking about somebody who has like flames shooting out of their ears and serpents coming out of their mouth or something, that might be mythological, that might be an astronomical representation or some symbolism. I think that's that tends to be that when it's very outlandish, it tends to be because it's not to be taken literally. It's to be interpreted symbolically. Like symbolic understanding, symbolic communication. That's literally what writing is. That reading and writing, even like words. Like when I say a word, the word is not the thing that I'm saying. It's something totally different. It's just breath coming out of my mouth. Similarly, these mythological and religious pagan stories and traditions, they're not the thing that they're trying to convey. They are the language, and you have to understand the language to receive the message. And I think more and more people are understanding. They transcribed or they they deduced from some kind of Mayan, basically the oldest Mayan codex on record, that it is um, just a chart of Venus, of the passage, the course of Venus. And is the codex, forget the name, but if you probably Google like the oldest, I believe it's the oldest Mesoamerican codex. And so while other codices, Mesoamerican codices are interpreted often as like histories of this or that. I mean, it can be both. I mean, I think they are royal histories, just like they are books of the dead, just the same as an Egyptian book of the dead, just the same as the funerary texts on the tomb walls of the Egyptian pharaohs, just as the pyramid texts. You know, they are both a history of the pharaoh, a history of the king, history of whoever this illustrious figure is or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I like I'm an I'm a democratic, uh, anti-hierarchalist, but this is just the way they tends to be, that they were all like about these um, bloodlines and these royalties, or the the basically nobility. And it was recording their lives, and it was recording the position of all of the heavenly bodies at through the course of probably their life, or at the time of their maybe birth, death, or maybe the course of their life. So that's what I got. It's not a lot, but I can guarantee, I can basically guarantee there's something to it. And um, I need to learn a lot more about astronomy. I've learned a lot from Andrew Collins. I thank him for his guidance with all of this. But I really think we need uh, if we had a concerted team, like I'm willing to fully pursue it on my own as much as I can. But if we have a team that's connected to each other, that's dedicated to figuring out, basically decoding what ancient religion slash mythology really meant, basically the real meanings behind the symbolism, and then going through and yeah, like basically deciphering all of it, or deciphering as much as we can, and learning what they knew, and learning from their their ability to pass these things down for thousands of years, using this symbolism, and also hopefully understand what the hell went wrong, why we are not able to, like, I don't even want to say we, but who, like, how was that destroyed? How was that legacy cut off? Who cut it off and why? Because it seemed to be pretty continuous for like 12,000 years at the least. I would say 20,000 years. I would say probably 30, 40,000 years. Um, but then it was cut off. And a lot of that has to do with Christianity. Some of it has to do with the modern, like even the atheists are often, the kind of worst culprits of the kind of dismissing everything ancient as, but not all. I'm atheistic enough myself, but like, I'm just saying what went wrong, like, and people have looked into this. There's a lot of probably good writings on the topic, but I'm still trying to figure out entirely what went wrong and more importantly, how we can remedy it, how we can undo whatever mental block has kept us so stupid effectively that we can't even like begin to grasp almost any tradition that came before us. You know, it's it's pathetic. It's not a good barometer for you know ideological health. So I think that's partly why that's one of my starting points, or one of my go-tos, is try to understand the ancients, because if we can't even begin to understand them, then what are we even doing? Um, like we should never be slaves to them. I'm certainly not one to defer to the ancients, to the moderns, to anybody. But the more we can realize that we've been handed a load of lies about pagans, about non-Europeans, about pre-modern people and pre-modern civilizations, um, and that a lot of this symbolism can be unraveled, and a lot of it they tell us themselves. Like the Egyptians say in their own texts, for instance, referring to Osiris, they like Osiris is an earth god, like a land god, and they say Osiris is land. Osiris is surrounded by water, and that's what he is. Like Osiris is the land. Um, but like we don't tend to, or I want to say we, but like Egyptologists, modern Egyptologists, do not tend to take ancients' word for anything, uh, or even when it's extremely plausible, and even when it's the most plausible, as in that scenario. So, okay, I do see the challenge here of drunk HighStory, but hopefully, I still think I threw in a fuckload of facts for you. So there will be, at the very least, if this spiel has not enlightened my audience, at least if you Google the stuff that I have talked about, you can learn a lot of stuff. Like you can confirm a lot of the stuff that I've said. So with that, this may or may not be my last ever drunk HighStory, but it's been a blast, and much love to anybody who stuck it out until now. Uh, take care. Peace.